another episode of Disruption Drives with a very special guest today. My guest today is one of the true experts in not just mobility, but all things transportation, and you'll quickly find out all things automotives. He's an associate. Bhuvan Atluri is the associate director of the MIT Mobility Initiative. You can find him almost every Friday from fall to spring at noon Eastern, running the MIT Mobility Initiative webinars under Professor Jinhua Zhao. Bhuvan spends his day researching solutions to the biggest mobility problems of our time. His interests range from basically every topic: electrification, autonomous vehicles. But today I have him talking about software-defined vehicles. And I want to point out Bhuvan's specific background in consumer goods, which he shares with yours truly, but fair enough. This is about him. And therefore it makes him an expert to think about the customer experience more than anyone else. And I wanted to pick his brain today on this topic. So, Bhuvan, thank you for coming on the show. And I
Thanks, Hari. Glad to be here. Thanks for having
Thank you,
me.
Bhuvan. I wanted to start with, look, you are a sort of a bit of an amateur historian on cars as well, but walk us through what is a software-defined vehicle. And you've mentioned that this is not a new concept, but walk us through that evolution a little bit.
Sure. Software-defined vehicle or SDV, just for short form sake, it's become a sort of a catchphrase over the last 5 years. But to be honest, software in cars is nothing new. Cars have thousands of lines of code since the early late 90s, even the 80s for sure. And actually, Volkswagen ran an ad in 1968 for the Type 3 Squareback. And maybe if you have the image, you can show it to the audience now.
Yes, we do.
Uh,
So I was asking the audience to guess which year this car was made, and then, well, fair, but tell us about the software in this, a car with a computer in it.
yeah,
Not
and
new.
and yeah, that was the tagline, right? Now a car with a computer in it, and this was like way back in 1968. While this car actually, didn't have like a digital integrated circuit board, it had, it didn't have microcontroller based ignitions. It was the first car, that could control fueling and had some sort of onboard diagnostics as well. The first car, in the traditional sense of software, of, an integrated circuit board with lines of code running things, would probably be the 1979 BMW 7 Series, which had the Bosch Motronic ECU being the engine control unit. So this car was fully run by
That
this
well,
engine tuning map. As you can see in this image here, that's the engine tuning map
when
that
that was
controls fueling. Yes, based on the RPM, manifold pressure, and parameters such as that. And this is a BMW, as you can see. So strictly speaking, I would say probably this is the car that set it all off. Though I think some of the Japanese cars had software for controlling wipers and other things, but the engine being the most critical component, being controlled by software, this is probably the first. And this just kicked off a whole revolution, and most cars then started having software controlling every single aspect of the car, from rolling your windows up and down, your seats back and forward, the audio system, your instrument cluster, you just name it, and it was controlled by software on a separate digital integrated circuit board.
And so one of the things that you talk about is, look, looks like software is now becoming more centralized within a car. Essentially, instead of a car with a computer, now it's a computer with wheels. We're moving to that world. What is the imperative behind this for a automaker, equipment, OEM, otherwise? Is it
Yeah.
cheaper? Or what does it unlock for why should a automaker who's, historically a assembly line, heavily economies of scale sort of business want to move towards software?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's good to just provide some context. So automakers or OEMs, as you mentioned, are very good integrators. They get, thousands of components from various tier one, tier two, and tier three suppliers, and are excellent at integrating all of this into a vehicle, which you can then go and buy and do it very reliably at scale, with very, very less margin of error, because these things are incredibly complex with, miles of wiring and, thousands of lines of code. So, tier one, tier two, tier three suppliers over the years have mastered the art of writing, this dedicated software on a small chip to control the movement of the windows or to control the seat going back and forward. And all these are dedicated. So The window component doesn't talk to the seat component, doesn't talk to, the audio component. And the automaker just puts this in the car and for sake of simplification, gives it, 12 volts and a switch when to turn off, when to turn on. It's more complicated, but, just bear with me here. So now what happens is there are 120, 130 of these individual, electronic control units in the car controlling different components. It's very complex, right? The supply chain is very complicated. It's There's a lot of manual labor here. So one I think attraction of the SDV is if all this could be consolidated under one high performance computer chip, which can do all of these functions. It reduces complexity. It reduces supply chain costs. So in theory, you should have it. It should be much cheaper for the automaker, for the tier one, to produce this car, which instead of having 150 discrete ECUs scattered around the car, it's down to maybe 3, 4, 5, and 10 years down the line, maybe just one
Yeah.
chip that runs everything, right? So it's mainly cost. If you ask me, mainly cost to reduce
Reduces
complexity.
cost of essentially the computational management, and of course we have managing computing, and we have parallel developments very much in computing itself becoming more energy
Exactly.
efficient. And so therefore you do it looks like you're at least on the your at least one hypothesis is that the cost of developing a car would effectively go down in relative terms.
Yes.
Tell me, and one of the things I wanted to sort of maybe sharpen the pencil on is, talked about, of course, the OEM being an integrator with a series of, suppliers around them. How is that relationship going to change? Because look, at a fundamental level, a supplier, I'm assuming, makes money through more complexity. And now you're pushing forward less complexity. How does that change the equation?
Yeah. So it's interesting, So while a lot of OEMs have their preferred suppliers, Toyota working with Denso, the German car OEMs working with, Bosch, ZF, the French companies working with Valeo. But you can buy an alternator from Bosch, or you can go, and buy it from Denso or an AC compressor. These things are it's interchangeable. Whoever you come out with an RFQ, whoever gives you a better price, you can go with them. It's and sometimes even in the different model years, there are different suppliers for the same component. So the 2022, Toyota Corolla may have an alternator from Denso. In 23, they may have moved with some other supplier. Just as an example. So while some of these contracts are long term, many are short term because these are not really that complicated, that high value components. Now, when we move to SDVs, because from ground up the vehicle is designed differently around the centralized or 3, 4 central processing units, the tier one suppliers have to be involved in the development stage of the car itself. It's not like the OEM develops the car and then gives out, an RFQ for, 100 parts which they need to make the car. The tier one supplier has to be involved from the development stage, and throughout the model of the car, they will be providing, the components. So in my mind, this needs to lead to more long-term partnerships, 10, 15 years through the development cycle. One example I can give you is I think Valeo and BMW are working together on the new class vehicles that BMW is introducing. It's also led to some stress. I think the Ram 1500 EREV was scrapped, and Valeo is now suing Ram for I think $25 million because they're already invested in these components to manufacture these vehicles. So it is leading to long-term partnerships, but it's also leading to more stress.
But this is an interesting point you bring up because you're all essentially saying tier one, all suppliers and OEMs are going to have much more scope within the relationship. Now
Yeah.
that's going to create, and therefore pricing power and buying power may change a little bit in the sense that, look, now that you have almost a consultative relationship, essentially, instead of just components that can be changed every year, there is a certain, are you going to see more long-term contracts is fundamentally I guess, the economic question.
I think we should because there's no other way to do this. In fact, if you ask me,
Which then
what
pushes out these smaller manufacturers or
it
suppliers.
does, it does. And also what could happen is many OEMs might absorb the tier ones, saying that, hey, we need to work much more closely. I don't want you working with anybody else. So I'm
Mm.
going to just buy you out and you work with me. Obviously, we've had companies like Tesla which have tried to do most of this in-house. But I mean, even Tesla, gets components from, different tier one suppliers. It's not like
Right.
Tesla does everything in-house, right? So it's going to be very interesting, and it's going to be challenging. Because for OEMs, you have to continue manufacturing your current lineup, many of which, are the traditional type of automobiles. This is what keeps the lights on. So you can't just shut that and move to SDVs.
Right.
It's not like you're starting from a clean slate like Tesla or Rivian did. So, and these organizations have a lot of inertia, right? They are huge, massive organizations.
Billions, hundreds
So
of billions. But
that's,
let's talk about the customer side of the equation, which I know you
sure.
follow specifically, which many people in the automotive industry don't. But Bhuvan is a consumer goods guy. But I want to start with business models, right? Which the cars are looks like cars with the software. Are they going to start learning from SaaS, for example? Are they what are the emerging trends in the business models of how these cars are going to just operate themselves?
Yeah, I think automakers were very enthusiastic initially about selling services in their cars and subscriptions for that matter. And I think 2022 was probably the peak where everything was a subscription, like your heated seats was a subscription, your dual zone climate control was an extra add-on. So customers felt a little bit cheated, to be honest,
Right.
because you've paid for this. I mean, a car is not a cell phone, right? You're paying like 50, $60,000 versus $1,000, and if you're being nickel and dimed after that. So a lot of companies went back, reversed these. So BMW had the heated seat subscriptions, which they reversed. So there are some things which you can sell as a subscription or offer as an unlock, maybe like full self-driving, better infotainment for that matter, but things which customers have come to expect on a $50,000 car, you cannot then charge subscription for it, like heated seats, dual zone climate control. So it's a little tricky to make money from services and subscription for an STV. I think again here it probably comes down to the cost, where through over-the-air updates, you can save the customer a lot of time in bringing the car to the service station for small fixes. I think around 30 to 40%. There was some research. We need more research here, but 30 to 40% of service station visits could be avoided by over-the-air updates. So you save costs here. So that's an attraction for the customer, right? If you have to take your car to the service station 40% lesser, I think that's a win, and it saves costs for the automaker as well. So subscriptions, I am not that sold on. The experience, yes, of course. The
Right.
experience of being able to customize your car, have it, sync with your iPhone, look the same, feel the same. That's a big draw. But subscriptions, I'm not so sold on. And of course, the whole over-the-air updates thing is a game changer. I mean, you don't have to take your car for, small niggles. These can be fixed. You wake up one morning and the whole experience is transformed, right? So you have a new car and you don't feel the need to replace it soon, which may be a good thing or bad thing.
But extrapolating that, you said, well, there's two sort of separate points you made, and I want to sharpen maybe both of them. One is, look, when you start saying, well, cars may move to subscription, that's definitely an interest if the cars can capture more money. Well, that's fundamentally going to the question of who owns the car. Because if you're effectively paying little more than a lease to even have your car anyway, you're paying it every month rather than right up front. Well, effectively, you don't own the car. Right? You don't really, because someone else owns it and runs it, and you just happen to sit in it or in an autonomous vehicle. That's one. So that may be a real push towards the reducing personal ownership of cars, number one. But the second point you want to make is an interesting point which you made, which is that OTAs will reduce potentially maintenance incidents and service incidents,
Yeah.
which then begs the question, well, uh, mechanics and even dealerships, which tend to rely on this, how do you see that changing? Because is maintenance going to be different? If 40% of maintenance is reduced to 30 to 20 to 40%, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
And I
maintenance
want to
is,
point
yeah,
out one thing, because this
yeah,
was one of the, well, at least the industry insiders will tell you that this is one of the bottlenecks for adoption of electric vehicles, because dealers tend to not want electric vehicles for that reason. There is a theory, it is not proven yet, at least broadly, that electric vehicles are easier to maintain. Well, they're not, but dealers tend to think that and they say, well, we don't want electric vehicles, we want our, So that could happen a lot.
I think there's going to be a shift in the value being drawn from post-sale, services. So while you won't make as much money in oil changes, brake pads, because EVs have regenerative braking, the brakes tend to last longer. I think you will still make a lot of money selling tires. I think EVs are, much heavier, more torque, so you're selling tires more often. These cars are much more expensive to fix in case of even a simple fender bender. So there, because of all the sensors and everything else, so you're going to make more money there. And I think in general, while I mean, the EVs tend to be more reliable because it's far simpler. It's a battery powering electric motors. Uh, there shouldn't. I think charging is another area where service dealerships can make some money there if they open up to public charging networks. But there is going to be a shift, I think, in service revenue. You don't need to go in as often to the service station. That is definitely going to come into play with the movement to SDVs and EVs as well. Because, and let us be clear, there happens happening simultaneously. The transition to the electric vehicle and software defined vehicles. And I think EVs plays in well into the whole SDV transition.
And
Uh,
that let me ask you that question as well, which is that does an SDV depend on being electric?
no.
Doesn't. So you can actually
No.
have an software defined diesel or
Yeah, yeah, we
gas.
do. We have, hybrids, even gas, deep petrols and EVs. It makes it easier because,
Right.
it's easier to control things with an EV. Whereas in terms of, motor and all that, you have more finer control of the motor torque and everything else for the experience. But it doesn't need to be, and vice versa, right?
Fair enough.
So
Let me sort of end on a bit of let me throw you a threat question here, which is, look, we're obviously seeing software defined vehicles, and we
yeah,
know for a fact that, look, all software is buggy. Surprise, surprise, because human logic only goes so far, and even the best, well-meaning software engineer, misses things. Therefore, as a software-defined vehicles become more popular, become, obviously widely adopted, what are some of the threats and weaknesses? And now you have centralized software that I assume the OEMs or the developers are going to keep it as a little bit of a black box. The average person outside cannot fix it. I mean, when I grew up, I had to learn to fix a car before I drove one. So, but that's no longer going to be possible. So lines of code that, very specialized engineers develop, but there's also likely of not just bugs, but malicious attacks is what I'm assuming. Is that something that, or things like infrastructure, right? Laws of signal, on the OTAs and so on. What are your thoughts on those?
yeah. I think with the whole connected vehicle, revolution that we've been seeing since, by connected, I mean, it has a cellular modem that, transmits data. We saw in 2015 when a Jeep was a running Jeep at 70 miles an hour on the interstate was remotely disabled by two hackers. I mean, the driver knew that the hackers were going to do this. So, these things are going to happen. The Jaguar Land Rover plant was shut down recently for a couple of weeks because of a cyber attack.
Mhm.
While that is not about STVs, but these are becoming more and more common. And I think the point that you mentioned, no, everything is moving to this one chip or two or three chips around the car, versus before where it was these 100 independent units which really didn't communicate with each other. So in a way, there was redundancy built into the system before,
Right.
right? And there was some safety in that redundancy because if the power windows failed, your car would still drive perfectly. Because that didn't really talk to the engine control unit or the
Right.
audio unit or the wipers or the headlights. But now, if everything is controlled by, this a set of two or three high compute chips, if you disable a set of malicious code, can, in theory, wreak havoc in the vehicle. So A is, I think, a lot of virtualization where this one chip is virtually divided into, hey, this section will do infotainment, this section will do drive control, this section will do body and light control, this section will do windows, this section will do navigation. And you cannot have code crossover from one, virtual section to the other virtual section. The other thing is the use of, API. So like you said, the code will not be accessible and any access will be through an API. to the car, a request for information, or to pass on parameters, or to receive parameters between domains of the car. So,
You don't want viruses or any such thing to attack the
yes.
rest of the car.
And
More failure.
how automakers implement OTAs will be super critical. We've had so many cases of OTAs making things worse. An OTA comes in and then your car is bricked, and it's happened to everyone. It's happened to Rivian, it's happened to Volvo, it's happened to established and new players. So this is something that, again, through digital twins, you can probably test a lot of this on your hand via software before and simulate any errors before pushing it out to your fleet of cars. So this is something, and how do you do, and for critical components, I think OTAs need to be thought of very, very carefully. Like if you're
Absolutely.
tweaking, a braking force variable, how is that going to, how, I think you have to like firewall the rest of the car and then implement this OTA and then disable that firewall. So in some cases, your vehicle might not be drivable, which customers might not like.
Right. And they won't know why, right? You would be like, okay, the tires seem fine, but turns out the software update's going on. We all know
Yeah.
how annoying that can be when so you walk into a rental car and the guy says, no, my system won't let me do it. Oh well. But
So,
I did want to ask you maybe a question on the OTAs as well, because data offloads are one of the big, I want to say constraints in fleet management. And so what is the latest on that? It looks like that is one of the big concerns. Every car has had a problem with data offloads is because one element of OTAs. But is this a big limitation here? Because look, you don't, sorry, you need more than just high quality infrastructure. It needs to be secure. It needs to be well programmed. The algorithms need to work. Are we even there yet, or is that just a massive bottleneck that is going to hold this industry back?
Uh, I think it also, we are looking at, more computation on the edge now because people are figuring out that we may be infrastructure, limited in terms of both security, bandwidth, latency as well for, time sensitive data. So we are seeing, and this will again increase the compute on the car itself, right? Let the car itself handle a lot of these computations and not have to transmit it back. But from an OTA perspective, I think companies will need to get very, very efficient on, what they are doing, why they are passing it. Is there a need? Like Tesla does OTAs very, very often. And companies, I think legacy OEMs do it much less frequently, like maybe 3 times a year or 4 times a year. Whereas in Tesla, it could be weekly, it could be,
Right.
bi-weekly. So different companies follow different strategies. Also, the typical Tesla owner is more tech savvy. He has it linked up to his Wi-Fi hotspot at home, things like that. Whereas the typical Toyota owner just drives the car. It has to rely a lot on cellular transmission, which, again, is not great compared to Wi-Fi at home. So it's going to be interesting as this transition. It's SDVs. The number of SDV models are still limited, owned by relatively well-to-do people. Probably have a detached garage with Wi-Fi connectivity. As these move to the more mass market vehicles, as this moves from the first owner to the second owner and the third owner, how will the vehicle, will how long will the OTAs keep coming? Because cars are now on the road for like 17 years because they're getting more and more expensive. People are holding on to them. So,
That's an interesting question altogether.
abs-
How does the secondary and tertiary market start looking for this?
absolutely,
Owns
because
people all that data? Who owns all
most,
that access?
most automakers just say everything is for the first owner, right? And
But
once it
that's
goes
the
to
thing,
second owner, we
because
don't really care.
you don't sell your software subscription to someone else and say, you know what, now it's yours, right? You don't throw it across the, I mean, you may have your personal details inside it, and fair enough. But
So
that's
that's the challenge. Yeah.
we should do a separate conversation maybe on that. But Bhuvan, wanted to thank you for your time. But really, look, everyone,
Thanks so
the
much.
automotive. So yeah, absolutely, the automotive industry stands at a very pivotal juncture, and Disruption Drive's job is to really get you to some of the big disruptions happening in this space. The transformation we're undergoing is really a dissolution of industrial silos and the rise of data integrated ecosystems. And I hope conversations with Bhuvan really gave you a hint of what's to come. Bhuvan, once again, thank you so much for coming, and look forward to having you again to talk specifically maybe about either OTAs or tertiary markets or secondary markets.
All right. Thank you, Hari. Glad to be here.